He's out of form, folks. Forgive me. I forgot to knock that one out of there. Good evening and welcome to Horse Center. HRT here. Rich with the charming and ever so charismatic Swiss Army Sean. Tonight we're joined by trainer Cody Beattie. Cody, how are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Oh, doing fantastic. Thanks for joining us. Sean said that he ran into you out at Penn National when he was over there. He had to hurry a little bit, telling me that your family's involved in Pennsylvania wrestling. Tell me a little bit about that.
So that night, Sean ran into me. I had a horse in that night, and it might have been like 7:45 that night. And I'm a diehard Penn State wrestling fan. I wrestled as a kid, and they got a fantastic program.
They do.
So they were wrestling Iowa that night. So that was number 1 and number 2 in the country. And so I was just panicked to get out of there. My dad had food made up at his place, and I had about a 10-minute drive. So I knew I had to book it if I was going to catch that first match.
So you watch it on TV, or did you? I mean, you can't get out to State College that fast.
So I watch them all on TV. On Rockfin, on Flow Wrestling, on Big Ten Network. I don't really miss a match at all.
Yeah, I grew up in the Poconos. I'm sure you're familiar with that, where that area is, not too far north of Sean. And I actually wrestled in college and in high school out in Pennsylvania. And a really good friend of mine is going to be inducted to the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame for high school wrestling.
Very cool.
Yeah, and if my grades were a little better, I actually might have went to Penn State to wrestle, but unfortunately, my grades weren't there. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about horse racing. That's your gig. So your family is pretty big into horse racing up and down the entire East Coast. So kind of walk us through your path to get to where you are today.
Oh, that's an open question, but I guess my parents did it my whole life. My dad's Todd Beattie and my mom's Stephanie Beattie. And I got cousins and uncles and aunts and the Rices, all the way from Linda Rice in New York to Brian and Holly Rice in Florida, to Brandon and Allie Rice in Florida as well. And from pinhooking to racing. And I actually got another uncle that's a blacksmith. So we're just really intertwined here. It's from all aspects, from, breaking, training, racing, prepping, selling. It's kind of a one-stop shop among the family here.
So for you, in terms of you getting into horse racing, because sometimes kids, they see their parents doing stuff and they're like, yeah, or the family kind of want to take a little bit of different path.
Right.
What was it for you that you said, or that moment for you when you're like, you know what, this is what I want to do too?
I guess I was sitting in college there in my first semester, and I was sitting in math class, and my whole life I grew up in horse racing, and I didn't have that much desire to do it, because it was just a lot of work at that time. I was cleaning buckets and doing stalls and all the normal stuff. And I was just sitting in math class after I'd been there a year and being locked inside and not being outside all the time. And I wasn't wrestling at that time. I was injured. And I kind of like that competitiveness. So when I didn't have that in wrestling, and then I lost it when I was horse racing, went to college, it was kind of like, you know what, it's time to get back and do what the rest of the family does. I remember the day I was sitting in math class.
And now, math will do that to a lot of people, to be honest.
I literally was sitting in math class, and I stood right up, and I walked out and called my parents on the way home, and they had completely different reactions. My mom's like, oh, you just ruined your life. Go to college, Cody. And my dad's like, oh, this is amazing. Join the family, wake up and go to work. He was all... It was polar opposite responses.
I can imagine. So obviously you preferred dad's response at the moment, and
yeah.
I'm sure mom's opinion on all that has changed since then.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Sean, been a while since we worked together. Well, not that long. So how
yeah,
you doing,
a couple
brother?
Weeks. I've been good and glad to met Cody out at Penn. I watch Penn all the time. So, for a limited stable, you win a lot. Talk a little bit about that.
It's just about having the right horses in the right races, and that starts by buying the right horses for the right dollar. And it gets trickier now that there's the horse population's down, and with that meaning there's not as many horses to buy, and there's a lot of sharp-minded people out there. So we're all looking at the same horses. So even when you spot a horse on the form that you think you may be able to improve, or maybe it gets conditions back, you still have other people that are seeing that. So even when you like it, you can't buy it like it is at a store. You have to put your ticket in, and then it's whether you win the shake or not. I've been in multiple, 3-4 person shakes on horses and didn't get them, and I saw they went on and did good, and that's just kind of the name of the game. But And when I first started off, I really wanted to just get a bunch of horses and get going. And I realized that wasn't quite the answer. Over the last maybe 2 years, I tried to focus on really keeping really live horses in the stable. It keeps the clients happy. It makes my job a little easier. It gets the employees happy. And, so just trying to keep a horse and just entering them aggressively and placing them, I think has been the key to finding ourselves in the winner's circle more frequently as of the last couple of years.
And I'm sure everybody in the family kind of has their niche or their strength. What do you think your strength is as a trainer?
I would say probably claiming horses, particularly the open type horses I like. There's a lot of different spots where you can just kind of spot them. And I do good with them older horses, and you get them feeling happy. You can get them fit enough, and they already know how to run. They know how to switch your leads. So as long as you can get them feeling good and motivated, they can sometimes, reincarnate themselves from the younger versions.
How hard is the claiming game when you get a horse and you're doing really well with it and then it's claimed away from you?
That can be frustrating, but I guess the best I'll put it is it can just be frustrating because you do so much to get them going right, and then you get them going, and you want to follow the sequence. So to utilize making the most money, you want to climb up the claiming lengths, as in, you don't want to blow different conditions. So you want to kind of walk up that ladder. And so if you get caught on the way up sometimes, that can be upsetting, but that's part of the game. And, if you didn't do that and you just skip conditions, you left money on the table, or maybe you put the horse in over its head, and next thing you know, the horse gets beat up a little bit and loses some of that confidence, which is what your entire training schedule is based around. And so I try not to worry too much about that and just try to put them in where we can win.
So from your experience, you say giving a horse confidence. It's a kind of a curious thing to me. Because you equate a confidence with people, and then you carry that over to a horse.
Yeah.
So explain to us how that is. It like the behavior afterwards, or everybody's like, you're a good horse afterwards, or how is it the horse picks up on it that it did something right and it grows its confidence?
It's honestly, it's amazing, and it's hard to explain because the entire industry, you're trying to communicate with an animal not using English. And so it's all body language and the way they act. And there's a noticeable difference from when a horse crosses the finish line in front and when they, get eased in the pack and getting sand kicked in their face. I mean, they might come back after the race, after winning, and, be trotting around the barn, even kicking a little bit, and almost kind of like an arrogant athlete. And I've seen them where they get, maybe they're on the rail and they get a rough trip and a bunch of sand gets in their face, and then they kind of fall to the back of the pack. And when you get them back to the barn, they're sound and stuff, but their head's kind of hung, and they kind of, feel defeated like a kid that just lost at a sport. You can just kind of see that demeanor on them. And I think
the kid dropped the third strike.
Exactly.
And
I
think
that confidence when they win it, I think that carries it to the next time. As in when even though they're stepping up in condition, they can't read that form. Mm-hmm. The last thing they remember is they went out against horses and they don't know if it's a derby or if it's a 4K claimer. They beat the other horses, so they're going out there thinking they're going to do it again. So they break that much sharper. They get better in position. They hit those tighter holes. They don't get intimidated in the rail. I just think that those things carry over from race to race.
What about those horses? Because I see this a lot. Those horses that get bet, but then they always finish second or third. They just don't want to win.
Those are very frustrating. And I had one of them recently, and it finally got through. We politely call that milking the condition, where you just kind of, keep getting second in it. But that can be frustrating, especially when horses like if they want to go to the front, and next thing you know, right at the end, they let the whole pack kind of catch up to them, and then a horse passes them, and then they just do enough to hang on there. That's frustrating because it's hard to get them. It's hard to convince a horse, to get over that.
I see a lot of races where horses. And I don't know if this is a similar condition, but you see a horse that maybe is not accustomed to being on the lead late in the lane.
Yep.
And they start looking around to see where the other horses are. So, and that inevitably breaks their momentum because now their head's looking this way and their body's going that way. Right. How do you break that habit? Or why does that even, is that from training with another horse that it's looking for another horse? Why are they looking for other horses?
Horses are naturally herd animals. They like to be them. I mean, when we break them at young ages, we put them in company. That's how you first get them comfortable going around the track together. And then we pull them away from each other. because they start getting aggressive. So then they start training too hard in the morning. So I think they always kind of have that natural want to be with other horses. I think at night when they're in front looking around, particularly at pen because it's nighttime, they might be looking at shadows or maybe the stands or movement in people, or maybe they hear something a little bit. But that would be, besides blinkers or equipment, it's hard to refocus an animal, especially now that the jockeys are capped with their whip. So a horse might be looking everywhere and the jockey might have already used 7 hits, but he can't do anything besides just hold on to those reins, and hopefully that horse is focused enough to get there.
Do you feel like you've lost some races because of the new whip rules? Or does it kind of even out that you've lost some that you might have won and you won some that you might have lost?
You know, I haven't run into a single situation that it's really made a difference. I know the jockeys really dislike it. And from a safety standpoint, it seems crazy that someone as professional as them can't correct the horse, because a lot of times that whip is used as a correction tool rather than a, enforcer to go forward. But myself personally, I haven't run into anything like that yet, but I suppose in time it's going to happen.
Well, I hope I just didn't jinx you.
I think you probably did.
And I just said, we've always given people good luck. We've never jinxed anybody.
And I just screwed all that up. I'm sorry.
You just unlocked a new paranoia on me. So
I apologize. I mean, that's just what I do. I interrupt and I screw everything up.
Well, what are your other paranoias that you said he introduced a new one to you?
So that one is new. The other one is the gate. I mean, you can't have a good race if you don't get out of the gate good. And I don't know what goes in horses' heads. You can school them all you want at the gate. Sometimes they get up there and they act like they've never seen that thing. Or you get a horse that's in beside them and gets disruptive, and next thing you know, your horse is acting up too. And now he can't even focus, and he misses the break. And there's only so much you can do if you spot the field like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just seen one today, and I actually sent Rich the video. I don't know if he saw it. Will Rogers down. The horse flipped out of the gate onto its back.
Ooh.
They gave it a couple minutes, put the jockey back up, and left it run. I couldn't believe it.
How'd it do?
A last. It was 30-something to 1 in a 5-horse field, so it got last, but should have never ran.
Right, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I have yet to see a horse break through the gate and then go on to win the race a little. I mean, probably the closest one, but they didn't really let him out of the break, was Modern Games in the Breeders' Cup, where they kind of let it out and then they scratched it and they put it back in and screwed everybody who bet on it, if you remember that 2 years ago at Dawn. I know Terry remembers that. Speaking of Terry, we have to have our customary, I call it traditional question now. It says, do you ever ship horses to the West Coast? And if so, you should go to where, Sean? Golden Gate Fields. Have you ever thought about that, or have we given you a new paranoia?
So, no, I've never thought about the West Coast as in California. I was out with my dad. My dad ran a horse named Terrace in the Honeybee out in Oakland. I got to be out there for maybe a week or so for that, and that was a privilege. But at the end of the day, I'm just 100% country boy. I find myself in the Northeast a lot. Pennsylvania and Penn National, surrounded by woods. So it's hard for me. I don't have the desire of the beach or anything like that. And the quality of racing we have out here, we have so many tracks available to us, being New York, Monmouth, Delaware, and Parks, that it would be very unlikely that I would find myself to the West Coast, just simply because if I had a horse I thought could fit in out west, I would just simply go to New York, which is only a 5-hour ship rather than however many hours that takes to get out there.
Yeah, or you could ship them over to Laurel or Pimlico just as well. It's not that far either, is it?
No. They're Laurel's about 2.5 hours. Pimlico's like 2. There's maybe a dozen tracks within 5 hours of us. I mean, that's the one thing about Penn National that no one realizes is how many tracks are so close to us.
Mm-hmm,
and you just got so many options of different distances, different surfaces, and different everything.
Yeah, our good friend Willie Martinez, sorry, Sean, he says, one of the best bloodlines in the business. Kobe's a fine horseman, class act. Best of luck, my friend. And believe me, coming from Willie, as I mentioned last time we were here, I spent some time with Willie and his wife, Jamie, down at Gulfstream Park. And Willie he's like Kiss. If Kiss were to go out, the rock star,
yeah,
that kind of persona, that's Willie. Everybody was coming up to him. So getting that from Willie is a huge compliment.
a couple years back, he rode a horse for me named Tap Chapper Prescott all the summer. I guess maybe 7-8 years ago, I was just getting started. And I maybe only had won 15, 20 races. And I was going out there and I was talking to my mom and my dad. And they're like, well, when are you gonna tell him, and kind of talking to me. I was like, this guy's won so many races. I have like 20 wins. I'll tell him good luck. What am I going to tell him that he doesn't already know? He knows the track. He knows everything. He's going to get it figured out.
Mm-hmm. Do you tell jockeys now anything?
Not usually. Unless I got a horse that, maybe ducks in or is a little reluctant to switch leads or a little goofy at the gate or in the post parade. But most times my jockeys are familiar with the horses, and it's pretty much just a handshake and just chatting in the paddock and telling them good luck.
We have another comment here from John De Silva. Kobe does it all. So that's unanimous with Willie right there. Today, he gave me a couple of entries for next week, couple of stakes names, and unfortunately didn't get the horse via claim today, but we need more like him to help this industry get better. For sure. Absolutely. And the bomb one says to you, who do you feel is an underrated jockey at Penn National?
Ooh. That's such small jockey colony. I guess if I were to pick underrated one, not to do with talent, just simply based on maybe not having the best year ever, I'd say Ricardo Chape. I've been using mostly Angel Rodriguez at the moment. I was Dana Whitney last year. I just have a really good click with them now. But I know every time I've ever asked Chape to ride a horse, he might not even be familiar with the horse, and he's given me 150% effort. And I know he's won a lot of races everywhere, but he couldn't possibly have more confidence from me in just how hard he tries. Last year, December 14th, Dana Whitney went down, and he was riding all my horses. That was like the 4th race. In the 5th race, I had a horse named Toto Sola, was in a second-level allowance there. And I walked in there, and Chape was available. He came right out there and rode the horse, and we won. And it's just – I know that's a little nerve-wracking. Those guys are putting their lives on the line. They don't know the horses. And after an incident like that where you had multiple jockeys down, he stepped up for me. And every time I've ever needed him, he's done exactly that. So if I had to pick one, I'd say him.
Well, John just commented there about Parks. I was going to say that Penn's off for the next couple of weeks, so you're having horses run at Parks?
Yeah, Penn's off the next 2 weeks due to scheduling with slot handle. So we'll be doing a lot of shipping to Parks and Charlestown and Laurel and kind of playing the book a little bit. They just got the book out for Penn, so if the races aren't coming back for a little while, we'll probably ship. But if they're going to be back in the first week or two of Penn, I'll probably stay and try to support Penn Racing just because I'm here with them now, so I'll do anything I can do to help them.
Absolutely. Do you like I'm sure you don't. You probably like the 8 races, but I have seen an adjustment in the field size is a lot bigger with the 7 races compared to the 8.
I mean, at the end of the day, everyone asks me this. I'd want to run nine races 5 days a week, but it's not there financially, and it's not there with the horse population. So we got to go where that is. When I first heard of 7 races a night, I was a little shocked. I'm thinking that's a frustrating deal, but I understand it. But as I look at the overnights already, I'm already starting to see short fields. So it's hard to justify, more races when we already have 3 of the 7 races or 7-horse fields. 3 of the 7 races are 6-horse fields. So it's hard to say we need more horses or more races because we don't have enough horses to even fill them.
Yeah. How would you, and I know this is probably an unanswerable question, but what do you think could get to the point where we can have more horses to fill more races, to kind of stem that tide of a shrinking pool?
The economy, ever since COVID, it's been shrinking for a long time, but I think COVID really dampened it. The economy shrunk, and, a lot of our investors and clients, they got out of breeding horses. And I think eventually that'll turn around because it's an age old, this business has been around forever, and it's a thrill like you can't explain to anybody, and everyone feels that. And I think now that if we can get the economy going the right way, horses will come around with it as well. I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to look at a reduction of racing across the country everywhere. I even see Maryland has 5-horse fields, and same with every track. So everyone's feeling it, and I just think that the answer might be a little bit of less racing, but for more money. Mm-hmm. And so that might be the angle we're heading towards right now, rather than getting more horses because I just don't see finding enough horses that fast.
Yeah, well, it takes time, right, for them to
tough,
be born and mature.
For instance, if you and I decided right now we're going to breed a horse, we'd have to find the mare, get it in full, wait a whole year for it to get born, then have to wait a whole another year until it turns, 2, and then we can start training it. And then so we're talking maybe if we decided at this moment, that'd be 3 years from now, we can maybe run a race right now.
And there's a commitment of money in the middle there, no guarantee that horse is actually going to ever do anything.
The horse could have, crooked legs up front. It could be prematurely born. It could get an illness. There's just a laundry list of things that could get in that horse's way. And not saying it can't be lucrative, but I think when money's tight and everyone in the economy, breeding horses just seems to be something that's kind of slid under the rug,
So Terry asked a question about parks. How do you think they're able to run 10, 11 races with several 8 to 9 horse fields?
I think parks, they do a lot better with the slot handle so they can offer more money. And I think that's the biggest draw around. If Penn would reduce racing and increase the purses, you would bring a lot more field size too. Just for instance, if the maiden special weight could go from 29 to 46 and we'd run 6 months of the year, you would bring people from everywhere and the field size would increase. So I think with Parks' purses being that good because they got a great casino there, I think that's what keeps people go where the money is.
I think a famous bank robber said that.
Right.
They're also running Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
When I get like a good horse and I'm really think I got a horse on the right spot, I'll ship it just to try to get the larger purse for the same condition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's what separates it too. They run Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and like you said, all the tracks around the Northeast, a lot of them are running more towards the weekend. So I think that opens it up too.
I think we'll see Parks. They're doing great right now with Penn's down right now. I saw a lot of Penn entries in there today. But I think when Monmouth, Delaware, Presque Isle, Finger Lakes, all of them open up, a lot of the Canadian guys go back up there. I think Parks will see the field size diminish as well. Not horribly, but I think it'll maybe shrink from a 8 or 9 horse field to a 7 horse field type thing, just for the summer, because it's hard for that many tracks to survive in such close quarters of each other.
So when horses ship from Penn to Parks,
yep,
I noticed that they tend to not run as well at Parks as they do at Penn. Is that because the horses at Parks are running against a little bit better company? Is there a track difference running day versus nighttime? Why do you think there's that little bit of a downgrade?
I think it goes with the surface. In my opinion, the Park surface is a lot deeper. So those horses that have been training on it, they kind of got a deeper fitness over it, and they're used to running over that more tiring track. So Penn National's track is a little bit harder and firmer, and I think the same thing about Laurel. So I think sometimes when we go to Parks, we go from a firmer surface to a deeper surface. Think about a guy running on maybe loose sand on the beach as opposed to sand right after a storm. And so that guy training on loose sand, he's going to be a little bit more fitted up and ready to handle those kind of conditions.
Okay. Well, I mean, I just noticed it, anecdotally watching the races, and it kind of always, I see a horse that does really well, and I expect to see their speed figures dip a little bit. You mentioned some of the things that can go wrong when you and I buy a horse with the crooked legs and so forth. Yes. Earlier on, you said you kind of know what you're looking for when you see it. So if we wanted to get in the claiming game, and Sean and I went out to Penn one night and we loaded up and we hit a bunch of big winners, and we say, you know what, let's claim a horse. What should we be looking for?
If you were asking me what I'd aim for as a horse with conditions, just because you got so many options, and I typically like to focus on the older horses with conditions. So somewhere around you might put a catch a horse coming out of the condition 8,000, which is for horses that are running for 8,000, which have not won a race in 6 months. Maybe it's just now starting to get conditions back, so you start to see it slide down in there for 5,000 or 4,000. Sometimes you can catch that horse on the way down, get it, motivate him a little bit, and then make him climb up from the ladder, and you get all those conditions, and then you can sometimes sell them on the way up, and that kind of helps repeat the cycle. But that's what I would say, because those races go a lot, and they're rating every couple weeks, and there's very similar speed figures from condition 4s to condition 5 to condition 8 to even the condition 16. We're not talking very different buyer numbers. So all you got to do is get a horse and motivate them a little bit, and they can just climb.
That's now John's comment there about Parks and him being in the racing office. I'm sure there's one at every track, but like I know John Da Silva, and I hear a lot of John Da Silva, and he answers. Is there somebody at Penn that is recruiting people to come to the track to race?
I think that could be. I don't know. That's a hard question to answer. I don't know personally. I don't physically see it, and I don't hear of it. And I think there should be a lot more. But even if they are, I think there should be a lot more of it, because there's a lot of things Penn National has to offer that no one realizes. And there's a lot of people looking for places to go in the winter, and we're one of the tracks that are open. And so I just think if somebody went down south and explained to them about the health insurance plan, pension, and everything we have up here, that I think more people would come. If it was, it's kind of like a resort that no one has a brochure to.
Yeah. Well, Sean asked that question for a reason. Go ahead, Sean. Tell him why.
Why did I? Well, because I could definitely do it. Yes, I could definitely do it. But I also, I mean, I don't know how old you are, Cody, but you're probably around my age, and you've been there. You were around Penn National all your life. I as a kid was there before the casino, and it's just like now nobody cares about the track at all. It's all about the casino, and that's kind of universal at this point, and just something that doesn't really add up to me.
It's a shame to see that trend from everyone caring about the horse to being more about the dollar and slot machine. And I think there's some smart people at Penn, and I sometimes think that they're got their hands held, or handcuffed, I should say, with what they can or can't do. I'm not sure Penn Gaming is that interested, in expanding racing as much, as simply because they probably make the majority of their money from, gambling, which from my side is extremely disappointing to hear. I mean, I sometimes feel like Penn doesn't care, but I understand that they're in it for a business, and everyone has a boss. I just wish that whoever that boss was, we could get together with them and try to explain that how we could do this and it would benefit us and it would benefit you, but we just need help getting there. And
I was just down at Gulfstream, like I mentioned, with Willie, and they have a casino right in you walk through. I don't know if you've ever been to Gulfstream. When you walk in, there's like a casino right there on the path to the finish line.
Yep.
And they do plenty fine. And I know they have big races and they have the championship meet and all that sort of stuff down there. But I have to imagine that some of that same sort of they have the little shopping stores and all that around. I have to imagine that if you bring people into the track and they walk by the casino, if they win a few bucks on a trifecta, they're just as likely to walk over to the blackjack dealer or the craps table then on the way out and see if they can, press that bet, so to speak. Or is there really not a crossover between the two gamblers, and that's really the problem?
I think gambling is gambling, and I think what you said is the exact problem. Is a race is every 27 minutes sometimes, as opposed to a slot machine. I could pull it 5 times in a minute. And so someone who's wanting to gamble, they're not going to sit there and read the form and look through it to gamble if they don't understand it. They're going to go over there and play blackjack, which they understand, or a slot machine. So an outcome we could do to help that is, what if we maybe had classes where you could teach people how to read forms, the younger generation to understand what they mean, and that way it's more as in a skill gambling rather than a game of chance.
That's another thing I would love to do. I've seen it where I've been there and people are lost on what to do. Yep. I think somebody it almost should be like a class field trip type deal where 20 people sign up and they walk around with you all night and you kind of tell them the ins and outs and show them all directions of the game.
I've thought about it before. What you could do would be interesting, because horse racing is horse racing. So even if the horse is 8-5, he could still lose because he could be sick. Anything like that could go on. But what you could do is you could say you got a room with a TV and a whole bunch of people that wanted to do it. You could show the previous night's races and you could handicap them, and you could then have them handicap and then instantly show them the race. And so then they can say, oh, well, this horse was 9-1 and he won. But then you could break down how that 9-1 horse won. Maybe it was a wet track. Maybe that horse needs the lead and he got the lead. Maybe, any of the circumstances of how that horse got it. So people understand that it's not just, I'm going to bet number 4 because that's what I do, or that horse is a favorite and I'll bet him.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I think for me, talking with people who are gamblers, they don't understand the difference between betting in a mutual pool versus, okay, I'm going to bet blackjack. If I bet $10, I get $10 back.
Right.
They don't understand the odds. And I think that's where horse racing has to do a better job of explaining that, hey, look, our payouts are better than football, right? Because you get 12 to 1s every day. Try to find a plus 1,200 that wins a football game that often. You're not going to get that many.
It doesn't ever come in.
Right. It does, but maybe 1 out of 60 games or something like that. And you're getting robbed by the casino or the line maker as well along the way, because the probability and the payouts, they don't match up. But
I'm 29, and in the younger generation here, we've got to step up in the horse racing game. It's nothing against the older generation, but it's we need some new ideas and some new people, some new motivated people to come in here to help. We grew up on technology, so we have instant gratifications. We have more power at our fingertips than any generation, just simply because, I can look up any stat ever right on my phone anytime ever. And so there's no waiting, there's no anything anymore. So I don't know how we can incorporate it into horse racing, because obviously we can't just rapidly run 7 races to satisfy people, but there's got to be something we can do to draw the younger crowd in. And in order to draw the younger crowd in, we need some younger horsemen to explain how to do it. I know I served on the previous 2 board of directors for Pennsylvania, and it was worrisome, looking at the future of Penn and just racing in general, with the older generation leaving and, the worry of what's next when they do.
mm-hmm.
Just because I just don't see enough young people around, as opposed to when I was a kid running around with a hot dog with my dad. I saw a bunch of 20s and 30-year-old men out there.
I think you have the answer right there, is that when we were kids, we were brought to the track by a family member.
Yeah.
And you don't really see that anymore. And I think where horse racing has an opportunity that no other sport really has, especially with the casinos and stuff, with the cost of going to a basketball game or the cost of going to a hockey game or a pro football game, it's exorbitant for a lot of families, right? Maybe you can go once a year and that's it. Horse racing, I think, has a shot where you can say, look, come on in. We're going to give you a $20 betting voucher. We'll give you a little bit of a background on how to bet. And then for the other $80 you spend, you and your family are going to get in. You're going to get pizza. You're going to get all the Coke you can drink. You're going to have a day for the entire family of 4 for under $100, including $20 in betting wagers. I think families would flock to get out of the house on Saturday to have 5-6 hours to be for $100 with their kids, and then get to see the horses, or maybe go to the paddock, and put their, give a horse a peppermint, a friendly horse, not one that's going to bite your finger off. But to me, I think that's where horse racing has gone wrong, because everybody we've talked to, including yourself, got their start at the track, right? Yep. And then they fell in love with the sport when they were a little kid, and then that carried on, and they brought their kid, and they brought their kid, and so on. And I do think that opportunity exists right now, but really so few people, if any, are taking advantage of how much it costs to go to another sporting event.
I think that probably hits a nail on the head. There's some things we could do to bring those people in. And even the worst thing, let's say you and I decided right now we were going to do that. We would have to go get, whether it's Laurel Parks, Penn's approval. And in my opinion, they would meet us with closed doors. Even if they hurt us, they wouldn't listen. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the hardest thing right now, is trying to break that barrier. And just think about events at I use Penn because I'm there, but the camels and ostrich races. You can't even stand in there. The food truck Fridays, you would think that's a simple thing. That entire apron is just packed.
Yeah.
It's just the simplest events that bring people out. And if we just did them more frequently, mm-hmm. maybe we could, prove to someone that could work, and we could get them, continually to happen.
I always shake my head at that, because I get so frustrated with that, because why do you want to see ostriches races, but you have horses that race all the time? Why?
What's novelty?
I don't get it.
my favorite one was, I was sitting there, so I always watch the races right on the wire. And I do two things often is one, if I ever see a guy betting on my horse or yelling for it along the line, if the horse wins, I take him in the paddock. I met him meet the jockey. I get him a pair of goggles, get him a win photo. It doesn't mean anything. It isn't like it's that big of a deal. But those guys, I see them afterwards. They're happy as can be. And just to talk about how little some of those guys know on the Camels and Ostriches Day, I think it was 2 years ago when they did it. There was a girl right beside me, and they were getting ready to run, and the 4-horse had just won. And she's talking to her boyfriend. She's like, "Man, this 4-horse has to go run on the grass next race." And I look over and I'm thinking, do you think that same 4-horse runs 8 times a night on different surfaces? And I asked her, I said, just think about it. I said, I want you to think about it. This is some problem solving. And she was looking, and I was like, these are all different horses. And I was starting to explain to her how many horses there were. And she was so mind blown that there was that many horses.
Yeah, my 5-year-old still thinks that when he goes the number 1 horse, he thinks it's always the number 1 horse. And I'm like, I have to explain to him, no, it's not.
Doesn't matter if it's gray, bay, just nothing. It's the same one.
But I will also say, and I've said this story before, but we met Tyler Connor, and I've had my 5-year-old with. We went to his house and all that. Yeah. And he will race cars and name him Tyler Connor, or he will go to school and mention Tyler Connor's name. I'm sure many kids don't mention jockeys' names, but now he thinks Tyler Connor's like an athlete like he sees on TV.
Tyler is a special athlete. I as a kid, that kid was a phenom at dirt bike riding. And, so the fact that he was able to take it from, riding motocross to horse racing does not surprise me. And he's a class act when you talk to him, too. He couldn't be a nicer kid.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Well, I also think that, as you mentioned, your generation's technology, you got to meet the people where they are. And that's on their phones nowadays, unquestionably. So I think you got to have that fast acting content. And we're trying to do some of that here. Jamie does a lot of that. Julie does a lot of that on TikTok. And the people like Electra Boone that are putting out a lot of that content for younger people that draws them into the business, which is maybe on the outside of the races itself, but some of the style and fashion for Derby week or Florida Derby or, that kind of stuff where it's a little bit more pop culture-ish than it is horse racing-ish. And, you can have maybe a Kentucky Derby night at Penn where people can come in dressed like they're at the Kentucky Derby or something along those lines.
Right. I think anything like that to try to promote the sport would be great. The sport has so much to offer. I mean, it's amazing what the horses can do. And if we can just show that to the world and everyone around them, everyone will appreciate it. There's nothing more special than horses out there running, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased, but to me, it's unlike others.
That's what a math class will do to you. So speaking of going forward, what are your plans going forward?
I suppose just trying to keep getting better, keep learning, trying to understand the rules and regulations nowadays is a full-time job. And just trying to find better horses and keep placing them better and collecting them and kind of just repeating the same thing, but still trying to learn. I think there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to keep getting better at. And whether that's a new niche in horse racing, whether that's with babies, whether that's anywhere, there's just a lot to learn. And I hope that I guess I've been at it for 10 years, and I hope that in 10 years from now, I can still keep learning. Because it shocks you how many smart people you run around that can just pass information off to you. And it's just a privilege.
Absolutely, for sure. Sean, anything else from you, my man?
Yeah, I got a couple more. One, how many horses do you have in your barn right now?
I guess I got a dozen right now at the barn training. And I could have quite a few more. It's just a matter of finding the right ones. And having a live horse to me is everything. I don't like to take a horse over there to be 20, 30 to 1 and just run up the track. It's frustrating for me and my clients and for my employees. It's discouraging. So I really try to focus on getting the right horses in there. And so I'm extremely picky when it comes to cleaning. I know a lot of my clients, they probably get annoyed with me because they'll send me 30 horses in a week. And I'll go down and I'll have a reason why I don't want any of them. Just because there's a certain niche of a horse that I want, and when it's there, we'll get it. And if it's not, a guy needs to exercise patience. And as long as you do that, because we are playing with finances, so as long as we are patient, usually the right one comes around.
And then my last one is horses, wrestling. What else do you do?
Hunting.
I see the antlers behind you, but the Green Bay Packers helmet.
Yeah,
What
Green
is
Bay
that?
Packers too. I'm a Jets fan, so we got to get Aaron Rodgers and end this thing.
Now you want him. A year ago, you didn't want him.
I am no longer an Aaron Rodgers fan. I haven't been for years. Ever since the guy started, I don't know what he's doing anymore. But he used to just be a student of the game, and I think he just maybe hung out in Hollywood too much or did too many discount double check commercials. But he just is not as accurate as he once was. And I'm ready to move on to something younger. He's been great for the organization, but I just couldn't possibly stand to watch him another year in Green Bay.
Well, I've said for years,
from close to Harrisburg, end up being a Packers fan anyway.
My dad's from Wisconsin, a little town called Anago, and so he's been a diehard Packers fan. And the horse racing game it's just so busy all the time. But as a kid growing up, Sundays were always a down day, and so we would get together. We watch football a lot. It's something we still do now, and I still find a way to, get to watch all the games. So that's how I became a diehard Packer fan.
Jay Marco says you can get Baker Mayfield, but I think he's in Tampa Bay now, so that they could trade for him. Maybe I don't know. I don't get
Baker was so good in college, and he even had a good run with the Browns. And he's just maybe a product of his circumstances where he was at. I'll be interested to see how he does.
I think he's just too short. I think that's when you're 5'9", playing against 6'5", 6'7" guys everywhere, and they're fast. I got to think every now and then stuff gets in his sight line, and he just doesn't really see what he thinks he's seeing.
I would have to agree. It looks like he struggles to see over the O-line a lot. And I'll tell you one thing he has that you can't get. The guy wants to win.
Mm-hmm.
He's a diehard winner. I watched him, having a bum shoulder and, running around out there still trying to win. A guy can – I like him. I never was a Browns fan or a real Mayfield fan, but I like him just simply because of how hard he tries to win.
He's definitely got that chip on his shoulder for sure. Well, we certainly hope that you get a lot more chips that you could pile up from your winning horses. Sean, any final thoughts before we let Cody go? I know we tell folks 30 to 45 minutes. We're right on that window now. We don't want to hold you any longer.
No, that's it. I appreciate Cody coming on. I'm sure, I don't get to the track all that much, maybe once or twice a year, hoping to up that. But I'm sure I'll run into you more, and hopefully you continue to win.
Just don't do it on a night Penn State's wrestling.
Yeah. I appreciate you guys having me on the show and everything you guys do for the sport. I looked at your page. It's awesome. Anything like this is fantastic. And just keep it up.
We're trying. Thanks, and have a wonderful night. And if when you're in the Penn office, let them know Sean wants to come and help grow the business.
I'll pass it off to him.
Yeah, they already know me. Yeah, they stopped me from doing business cards on Penn Mile Day, so it's kind of hard to get a hold of them at this point.
Perfect.
All right, have a wonderful night. Thanks, Cody, and good luck.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
You too.
All right, Mr. Sean, I've still got that technique down pat. The big head, Sean. Always fun to meet new people, Sean, in the business, introduce folks to the young folks in the business, trying to grow it, good ideas, and I wholeheartedly agree. There's things that they got to do to bring the younger folks in. But I think, at least from my experience and what we've heard from people over and over and over again, to me, the key is the family. Bring the family in, get them out for under $100, and families will show up right and left because it just costs so much to do anything nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add to that, you could have special, getting to pet the horses, or like you kind of said, that kind of stuff is unique and special that if you have somebody do it once, or I didn't know Cody did that with the winner circle thing. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool as hell.
He doesn't think that's a big deal, or, he says that, to that person that does that, we always talk about that, especially if it's a kid, that lasts for a lifetime.
That's a memory.
You're right in.
Yeah, that's a memory. And one of those things that you're ever, like any single time you're at a track, you're going to remember that time where you're watching a race. It's going to trigger in your head, hey, I remember when I was at Penn National and Cody brought me to the winner's circle.
I love his idea about actually doing the whole thing of like giving a book and going over past races to somebody new, because you can explain what happened in that race. I think and it's an instant gratification, which they're not going to get going forward. But I also think, everybody says 25 minutes is too long. And I always say, by the time you go to the paddock, if you participate in the going to the paddock, so if you make it special that you get to do stuff in the paddock and stuff like that, by the time you go to the paddock, by the time you leave the paddock, put your bets in, you're getting to the wire to watch the race. If you're doing that much walking, that 25 minutes goes quick. Now, if you're just sitting somewhere, it's not going quick.
But it also depends on what you're doing in that 25 minutes with that time, right? If it's just dead air and there's nothing going on, and that's why I feel like they have to have a little bit, that's an opportunity to create content, put the content up on the board, like you said, have interviews, so you could schedule interviews and you could bring people maybe that are in there, but maybe not, to the backside, but you can get somebody out in the morning and they're filming workouts, talking to the clockers, getting some additional information out to people, and maybe have meet and greets in between races with jockeys that aren't in an upcoming race. Just stuff like that, little things that to keep the people's time moving so it goes quicker. And that way, they're because the truth is those damn phones they're killing our attention span, man. Right?
Well, and another thing I say this all the time too. Baseball does stuff every half inning to keep people engaged. Why can't horse racing do little silly stuff between races to keep the young fans engaged and keep anybody engaged? Or take Cody's idea about the old races. They could show old races in between too. Old, memorable, good races that are just in a draw. If you have it on the TV screen, it's just going to draw eyes. And keep
and even down in because you mentioned slot machines in places like Kentucky, they have where you can bet on old races, right? They have, and they're randomly generated, so you don't know what race it is, and they change the names and all that kind of stuff, so you can't go back. But I mean, why can't you run a couple of those every 3-4 minutes where people can actually bet on them? You cast them up on the screen, right? And then people can go bet on. And I also think like they should. This is just me because I would think I would win a few more bets, but they should open up the quarter mile trifecta, the half mile trifecta. Then maybe you can stack bets on top of each other. It'd have to be fixed odds or something like that, but pick the horse who's going to win at the quarter mile marker, pick the horse who's going to win at the half mile marker, pick the horse that's going to win at the end. So in a sense, a three horse parlay, and you're going to get 200 to 1 odds or whatever.
I think the problem with that, one, the trainers would be able to bet on that, and they're already telling the instructions to the jockey, so they know where their horses are going to be. And two, the track's going to be at liability because it's not going to be a pari-mutuel pull at that point.
No, it'll be fixed odds at that point, right?
Right. So if
that's just all math. That's all math at that point, Sean. The tracks can figure out exactly where to put the odds and how much money. So you might have a horse that has a blazing ability to get to the lead. That one's going to get to the lead, and that horse essentially is going to be minus 500. You know what I mean? So you're going to have to get the other two right just to get a bet where you're minus 110.
But yeah, and overall with this whole conversation is there just needs to be at every track a room of 2 or 3 people like we just did tonight, and talking about this stuff and trying to institute some of it. And the sad reality is most tracks, nobody's having this conversation.
No. Well, the thing is too, is, cost, right? Everything has a cost to it. So you have to hire people, and then you got to invest, and things may or may not work. So I think they have to look for low cost, high return items. And I think the first thing they should do really is they should hire somebody like, a handicapper that can come in and, even like Brisnet could pay $20 or whatever to put somebody in a track or DRF and explain how to read the form to people for free, right? So come in for your, whatever the cost of the form is, $5, $10, whatever it is at the track. Come in, get the form, and with that form, come in half an hour before or 45 minutes before the races start, and we'll walk you through, or for the 10 minutes in between races, we'll walk you through how to read the form. And then you get the form, so you're going to sell more forms. You're going to introduce people to your form, Brisnet versus DRF or whatever, and then the people will understand what they're looking at. And maybe then, because for me, a lot of fun of it is the process. It's like a creative process, going through the past performances, trying to hash through data that I'm creating, sort of to find that holy grail of horse racing. It's a creative effort for me. And for a lot of other people, I think it's the same thing. It's a creative effort. And at the end, the horse race is like your final product. Did it come out like you thought it was going to come out? And of course, you can wager on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I say not worried about the 25 minutes, but I hate studying the night before, because simply I study the night before and I want to see okay, this is what I looked at. This is what I saw. Let's race. I want to see how good did I predict that race. And now I have to wait 12 to 15 hours to actually see that result.
Okay, John, question for you. Between myself, Terry, and Charles, who do you think they would want to be see dunked the most? What do you guys think? I'm voting. Me personally, I'm voting for Charles. Let's dunk Charles. Anyway, all right, Sean. Anything else before we get? I know tomorrow. Who is your guest tomorrow night?
Tomorrow is former jockey, now motivational speaker. He wrote an autobiography, Eureka da Silva. He won a lot of big races in Woodbine, won a ton of races. And then, like I said, he wrote a book, a very revealing book about his life and being a jockey and stuff like that. And he's a motivational speaker too. So a little bit of everything all in one tomorrow.
That'll be a good one for sure. And then next week, who do you have scheduled when Jamie returns?
Now you caught me off guard. I don't have that one.
Well, you should know I'm going to do that. All right.
I don't know off my head. I'll have that in a
Terry
second.
and I minus. Okay, so Terry and I are supposed to get together tomorrow. We will get together tomorrow for Tampa Bay Downs. I missed this morning because my car, I don't know, the alternator light came on, and then all of a sudden it stopped working, and then I got to jump, and then I had to drive home all the way through downtown Chicago. And as soon as the car started back on, like all the power went out in the car. The blinkers weren't working. The speedometer wasn't. Nothing was working. I don't have any idea how I made it home, but thankfully I did. Haven't gotten the bill for that one yet, so I can't wait for that. Minus my car blanking out on me tomorrow, Terry and I will get together to do Tampa Bay Downs, and then on Thursday, Charles will return. We're going to do Gulfstream Park. Saturday, we'll try to hit another pick six. Terry and Charles, they put the ball on the tee. They took big swings, and they put the ball in the stands at Gulfstream Park. Both hitting the pick six. Terry actually hitting it twice at Gulfstream Park. So we'll see if we can cash another big carryover on Saturday. Tom is out on Friday, so no 4 on Friday. And then next week, I know those guys are going to be in down at Oaklawn. So if you're at Oaklawn, say hello to Terry, say hello to Tom. Unfortunately, I have to go to Philadelphia for personal reasons, and I won't be down there. But and anyway, by now you have a sense of what we're going to do next week.
Yeah. Okay. So next week when Jamie's back, we got Monday, we got Veronica Gusick. She does gate to wire. So she's been in horse racing, and she's been at Woodbine, not Woodbine, in Australia doing stuff with horses too. Be interesting there. And then Tuesday we have Katie Larson. She's got a background in Tampa and stuff. Jamie knows her and scheduled her. And then Wednesday we got Jarrett Loveberry, who's if all things go right, be riding in the Kentucky Derby for the first time this year.
Mm-hmm.
So
that'll be good. Well, hopefully we can get in the winner's circle with him. Unfortunately, John, I'm going to be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and going home on Sunday. So I won't be there Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. But I do plan on coming back out there, most likely to catch up with Sean for the Pennsylvania Derby. So Sean might be working. I might not. I won't be working. So I'd love to be a guest of Parks to come out there with the camera and then videotape stuff and then put it out on the internet 6 months later. I'm still working on that, I promise you. All right, Sean. Well, that wraps it up for today. That takes us for Wire to Wire on this Tuesday. Julie should be back tomorrow with Sean, and then that should be a fantastic conversation with Eureka da Silva. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to hitting some winners at Tampa Bay tomorrow. But no matter what you're doing for the rest of this Tuesday night, we hope, Sean, that it ends up in one place. And that place can only be
the winner's circle.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. Have a fantastic Tuesday night, and look forward to getting together for Tampa Bay Downs tomorrow.